Okay, so let's get started. Let me just quickly introduce myself. Hi, I'm Shreekala. I'm the co-founder of Crackverbal. I've been in this industry for over 12, 13 years now. Prior to my entrepreneurial journey, I was in technology. I worked for Hewlett Packard for almost 7 to 8 years. Before that, I worked for a startup. Throughout this journey of entrepreneurship and working with students through their GMAT and MBA journey, I've been through a lot of stories, a lot of success stories, lot of journeys. And this has given me a lot of insight on what exactly are the confusions and the questions that MBA aspirants, when we go through this process, they have in their mind, and what could we do as mentors to help you guys to get a better idea of what you want to do in future, right? So that's a little bit of my background. I have also been part of the ISB Goldman Sachs women fellow program. I'm also part of the Cherry Blair Foundation, where we help women entrepreneurs across the world. I also have my co-host Sandeep. Sandeep, you want to introduce yourself?
So for me, I think in terms of my background, I think one of the things, obviously, as you can see, is I'm an MBA myself. I graduated from HEC in Paris, and I had the opportunity to work across different geographies. And I've also gone through a lot of these journeys that you guys are going to be talking about today, and we are going to be talking about today, which is I started off in an entirely different industry. In fact, I was mostly in automotive when I started off. And this is for me a completely different life, but I think that's the whole point of the self journey and the discovery and the journey, etc., that I have gone through to find something that I'm truly interested in. And that's where I sort of been in this industry for a while, after working across different industries and geographies and finding my North Star, as they say. I have been in this industry for close to 5-6 years now. Not as experienced as Shri is, obviously, but I've also gone through a lot of these stories and gone through different profiles, and I've had a lot of experience, not only running through my own journey, but also connecting with a lot of people. So I think it's been a great understanding for me about this industry. It's a great understanding for you, hopefully, from this session in terms of what it takes to get into the MBA and what the journey takes. So looking forward to having a great session today.
With that, we come to the most important part, which is the topic of the day, which is how we are going to structure this entire session and what we are going to talk about. More from your perspective. So this is not going to be my perspective or admissions committee's perspective or Sandeep's perspective. This is completely going to be from a lens of what you bring to the table. What has been your background? What is your present? What is your future? And how are we going to kind of connect all these dots to actually create your story on why it makes a lot of sense for you to do an MBA, right? Because more than anyone, whether you convince your mentor of why you want to do an MBA, whether you convince your family why you want to do an MBA, whether you convince your wife why you want to do an MBA, or your girlfriend or your boss or the admissions committee, right? The most important person over here is you. And you have to convince yourself that you have to do an MBA first. And this entire session is to just focus on what are the kind of questions you can have in your mind, like an outline around that, and how can these questions lead to the right answers, the answers that you need, and how will that connect to why an MBA can be an important aspect for you, more from a future perspective, right? So that's what we are going to focus on. These are more like a bunch of questions that I've put in over here. You can just take a glimpse and then I'm going to shut it down. I want to understand what is it that you bring to the table, right? All of you are not starting from blank slate, which means there's so much that you have in your background or in your past that you can actually build up to create a story around why you feel the need for doing what you want to do right now, right? Now, let me ask you questions on, just ask simple questions on what are the kind of roles have you been exposed to so far, right? So if I have to just look at the first question over here, can you kind of give me a glimpse on have you been on leadership roles? Maybe you can just put in yes or no. Have you taken up leadership roles? Now, leadership roles doesn't necessarily mean you have to be a team leader. Leadership doesn't necessarily mean that you have to have a 5 people or 6 people reporting to you. Leadership can be based on if you have taken initiative on something, if you have created some process around something. Great. I see a lot of people talking about leadership roles. Great. So talk about that. So pick leadership as one aspect and say yes. Think of what are the kind of instances that you have taken up, or what you have done over the 2 years to 19 years, whatever range you are in terms of experience. What are the kind of stories you can bring in? What are the kind of thoughts you can bring in more from a leadership role perspective, right? So that is one aspect. The second question I want to ask is, have you taken up different roles in the future? What kind of different roles have you taken up? Have you taken up different roles? If you can type in yes or no. Different roles as in, say for example, maybe you started as a graduate management trainee and then you graduated to doing different kind of roles. Say for example, if you're from an engineering division, right? You started with someone who is, say, a junior and maybe picked up similar, smaller roles. And then you graduated to, great, Ram has put in, from support analysis to consultant to lead. Can you all put in your journey also? From sales to content manager. Great, Mayank. Right? What has been your journey more from a roles perspective? Apart from that, for others, just think about it. This is one question that I would want you to pick. The second question I would want to ask is, if I have to look at it more from a career progression perspective, how do you think your career has progressed so far? So, for example, if I have to ask you more from a career progression, do you think roles so see, one part is the title has changed, right? Obviously, there are people who have said, okay, I have become from a developer to team lead to an IT consultant to, something else. Or somebody who says, Srinivas is saying that I'm a design engineer, I'm getting into a head of department. Let's look at the third aspect, right? Do you think more from one is role, one is title, one is obviously salary. So more from a career progression perspective, how do you think have you grown, right? More from, think of it more from a roles and responsibility perspective, right? So like, for example, a lot of students who come to us who say that, I am in a British telecom project for the last 7 years, right? And, it has been the same project. I have nothing has changed much. But the question to ask is, when you started your career, when you joined that company, when you started on that project, to what you are now in the same project, how are people looking at you differently? Are you a subject matter expertise? Are you someone who people look at you for, answers to some problems that may face? Are you someone who is looking at mentoring people in your team, right? Has that been a change more from where you started your career to now, right? I'm looking at more from a professional perspective. Do you think your career has progressed from where you started to where you now, even if it's 2 years experience?
Yeah, I think just to add on to that point that you made, I know we recently, I think, had an experience of working with one of the students who basically had, if you look at her profile, she had a similar title on all her experiences. So she'd worked across industry, she'd worked across different companies, but everywhere it's a data analyst. And she also was of this thinking where she said, you know what, my role really hasn't changed and I don't seem to be able to show any career progression. But what changes most of the time is, even if the position remains the same, the company changes, the scale of operations sometimes change, and that also is career progression. If you are handling a $1 million project and you're handling a $50 million project today, you're handling a $100 million project day after, or if you've had growth in terms of the people you're managing, you did not manage anybody to you manage 10 people to you manage 50 people, that also is career progression. And that is something that I also want to tell the people watching, that it need not be, as Shri said, changes completely in terms of promotions and titles, but it could also be more in terms of looking at your roles and responsibilities and how that scale of your impact or scale of your work has also increased. That it's also qualifies as a career progression.
Perfect. Yeah. Exactly. Right. So I have some people, very interesting chats over here where somebody says that, I have been in a team management to OEM as an individual contributor to also getting into a specialist role. Though you say that you never had an opportunity to solve problems initially, but now you are kind of focusing on creating a business pipeline and building a sales funnel. Awesome, right? So that is all your lens of past. That is what you bring to the table. And that is what you have to showcase more from your lens of past perspective of what you bring to the table, right? So the other aspect that I also want to ask, and this can be a very important aspect more from an MBA perspective too, right? Everybody talks about saying that, MBA is going to give you good network, or you have to have a good network, or you have to keep networking. What I want to ask you is, how strong is your current professional network right now? To give you an idea, right? So if I have to ask you, don't look at it more from a LinkedIn Connects perspective, right? Everybody says yes to every LinkedIn Connect over there, right? So I'm not talking about LinkedIn Connect perspective. I am asking that tomorrow, if you have to go and look for a specific role, how many people do you have in your network that you can reach out to, right? Whether they help you, not help you, don't think of more from a result perspective. But what I want to understand is how many people from different companies and different roles and throughout your journey, whether it is 2 years experience or 10 years experience or 20 years experience, right? How many people do you think you can reach out to in your network to get to the kind of role or get more information about a particular industry or a particular role? How strong is your professional network, right? What have you developed so far? I also want to ask you one question over here. How good are you with presentation and public speaking? Because when you're applying for an MBA program, right, this is one aspect which is more like an hygiene factor, right? Sometimes what happens is my role in my company does not need me to present something. No, if I am a programmer or if I am someone who's focusing on more on a technical stuff, I am not very I don't need to do that more from a role perspective.
I just wanted to add a couple of my 2 cents on some of the things I saw. So I think one question was in terms of the network. And I always come back to this because, guys, I'm an MBA myself, and I know the value of network, and you will see me alluding to network a lot of times in this presentation. But somebody mentioned about benchmarking, right? How do I benchmark my network? And one really nice way is using the LinkedIn model. Now, the LinkedIn model is good. I'm saying use it for personal use. Of course, like Shri said, everybody and anybody accepts LinkedIn requests usually, so that's not your bankable network. But looking at it, saying that, okay, which is my first circle, which is my second circle, and I think that's a great way to benchmark and say, okay, people I can pick up the phone, people I can reach out to, people I can say, hey, can I meet you for a cup of coffee tomorrow and just talk, not from a asking for a job perspective, not from a, I saw this post on LinkedIn and please, can you connect me to this? No, just a conversation. Can you start doing that with circle one? That is one good way to benchmark it. And then the person of person, like I know Shri today, and then if Shri can connect me to somebody else, and Shri knows me well enough to say that, okay, you know what, I don't mind connecting Sandeep to this person. I think that is your great leverage that you can do with Shri in your network one, in your circle one, and then whom she can connect to, chances are they will respond faster, so they become your circle two. So that's a good way to benchmark in that way, and that's something I just wanted to add. But apart from that, I think most people and most answers I'm seeing, especially in the public speaking and presentations, it's good to know that a lot of people already are in that situation, and a lot of people are actually working on improving also. So great to see that.
Right. So in fact, I was working with one of the MBA aspirant and, applying to top schools in Canada. And he said, I'm not very good at articulation. That's the reason why I'm a research analyst, right? So it was more like a joke for him. But I completely understand it's not something that was part of his role, but that is something that he had to hack and conquer, right? Because his interview required it. And, eventually in an MBA, any role will require that, right? So that is something that is extremely important, right? So now for all of you, you have this lens of your past, right? When I say past, what you bring to the table, what all you have in your kitty in terms of leadership skills, in terms of network, in terms of career progression, in terms of, I also put in international experience over here because that's also something that can be important because if I have to look at what we are talking about today, everything somewhere stems to what B schools look at, right? They are going to ask you questions in your essays which actually are answers to, which actually maps to these kind of questions that we'll talk about in the next half an hour also, right? So everything maps to what the B School is also trying to understand from you, right? So one question I left out over here is more from an international perspective, international experience perspective. Why do you think international experience is important? Maybe if you could just put in your chat, if you have, say yes, and if you feel why you think it is important, right? An international experience need not be that you have actually gone and worked in a foreign location. It could also be working with foreign clients. It could also be working very closely with geographically spread out teams. That could be something that you could look at more from a international experience perspective, right? So cool. So all this is more from a lens of the past. This is what you're coming with in your kitty of what you bring to the table, right? Top 4 or 5 things is something that we need to know from international experience, leadership skills, career progression, what are the kind of roles you have taken up. Perfect. I think a lot of people are talking about over here of clients across APAC, in US, Europe, and things like that. Now let's get on to the other side, right? The lens of the future.
I think it's a great starting point for us at this stage. I think we figured out from a past perspective, I think A is first understanding where you are, who you are, what your experience is. And then thinking about actually why are you taking part in this entire journey, right? So why are you even considering the MBA? Why are you considering career progression? Why are you looking at changes in your life right now at this point? I think all of it stems from just understanding where you are and where do you want to be. So we always say, it might not be the fastest way to do things, but at least starting as a starting point, thinking, okay, where do I want to be? Visualizing where you want to be a little later in your life. And I'm not saying, look at it as a 20-year perspective. That's just not going to work. I'm not saying in 20 years, who do you want to be? But more in terms of, okay, I'm working in this industry right now, or I have these experiences right now. Where do I see myself a little bit later in the future, right? And when you see that, when that's the starting point usually, and that could stem from, your short-term goals, it could stem from your long-term goals. And these are the points we want to touch upon. So maybe we see, we saw a lot of people talk about their experiences so far. Everybody, look, what is the huge thing that we all talk about, which is right now, generative AI, right? For example, in the tech space, that is something that we've been talking about a lot. And we talk about ChatGPT and how ChatGPT maybe is taking away jobs, etc. But as the meme says, the first thing you need to know is whether ChatGPT can take your job or not. And that stems from understanding a little bit about what you do. And if nobody really understands what you do, you're safe. I mean, it's a funny way to look at it, but I think it stems from trying to understand exactly where you are, what you are, and understanding your industry. I think that's the main thing out of the whole thing. It's figuring out where you are. See, look, you spent 2 years, you spent 5 years, you spent 10 years, you spent 20 years in this industry. One thing that we can expect you to know is to have insights about this industry, right? And having a little bit of an outlook in terms of where the industry is going and where it is taking us. So all of it stems from, somebody mentioned about finance and saying that I don't know what I really want to do, but it's about what do you do exactly in finance, right? Because finance is a huge field. But if you come back to us, I'll give an example, right? Like looking at it from a supply chain perspective, right? So everybody, for example, talks about Amazon, or working in Amazon is a cool field. A lot of people might be working in logistics and say, you know what, I want to get into e-commerce. Or within e-commerce, what is the new thing that's coming up? It's technology, right? So your answers can't be that vague at this point, at this stage. It's more about really figuring out what it is about this industry that's attractive. What is it about in this industry that you're seeing as a bit of a future, right? So what is the trend in the industry, like with Amazon, right? So you can't say technology is what drives it, or you can't say that, you know what, faster deliveries or making sure that everybody gets their product faster. These are things that have happened in the past and are, like forgotten at this stage. It's more like an expectation at this stage. But looking at trends in the industry, think, okay, what sustainability, for example, that is something that is very, very useful, and that is something where I want to see my future in, because I think that right now what we're doing in the supply chain industry is a very wasteful project. It's a very wasteful process where a lot of it is going for waste. A lot of packaging is excess packaging is happening. I want to be at the forefront of making sure that the supply chain is more carbon neutral, the packaging situation goes away, and we're able to do it more in a sustainable nature. So that could be the trend. For example, that could be an insight that you get from working so many years in the industry. And that's where you talk about your long-term goal, or you talk about just starting as a starting point to figure out where you want to be in terms of an industry post your MBA, right? Obviously, some of the questions that we mentioned here, these are great starting points as well to figure out in terms of your future, what do you want to do. One of the first things we looked at is geography, right? So I think a lot of people obviously approach this MBA question from a geography change. What geography? Of course, great starting point. What are my short-term and my long-term goals? I always look at this that your entire, we will talk a little bit about the MBA a little later on, but I always say that everything that you do, given your experience, given the MBA, given your ambition or your motivation about what you want to do, should all sort of flow, right? So it should be in terms of that, okay, this is what has been the driving factor for me in my life, and that is what will lead me to my short-term goals. And doing those short-term goals will finally lead me towards my my long-term goals, right? So that's how you look at it. And it's also about understanding, having a backup plan most of the time in terms of understanding what if I don't get into the role of my choice, right? So it will always be, in some situations, it will always be that you have a plan, I want to get into position X, position Y, position Z, but sometimes it doesn't happen. And a lot of times it need not be something that are in your control, but it could also be things, for example, the industry isn't hiring, or there are not many opportunities in that field. But do you give up? Or do you say, no, you know what, there is another way for me to get into any of these roles, and I'll probably have a backup plan to do this, right? A lot of people, I'm sure, come from, in India, a lot of people who apply from that competitive pool tend to be from the tech background. And one of the things we always get in terms of people trying to change and trying to move with an MBA is to go into product manager roles, right? A lot of them talk about product management as one of the roles that they want to get into. And why do they want to get into product manager role? Again, it's understanding what is it about a product manager that drives you, right? So it could be the skill sets that are needed for a product manager, or the kind of experiences that a product manager has that makes you feel I want to be in that state, right? And how do you think about this? Have you worked with a product manager before? Have you seen what a product manager does? And maybe the fact that they are at the cusp of business and technology is something that is intriguing for you, or the fact that they sometimes are able to take decisions at a much higher level, or they're able to think at a at a back to basics level, or a root cause analysis level. That's something that's interesting to you. Or it could just be the project management part of it, or the client interaction part of it that's interesting to you, and that could be a reason for you to consider being a product manager. But if it doesn't happen, where else can you go, and where else can you get the same exact skill sets of product management, stakeholder management, client management, and that kind of exposure? It could be in tech consulting, for example, right? And that's where you understand that, okay, you know what, maybe my first goal or my first step is to get into product management. But if it doesn't happen, then I will look at coming into a similar industry that will get me similar exposure, but then maybe I can make the final switch into product management much later on. So I think it's also about understanding in terms of having a backup plan if you don't get into the role of my choice.
So this is something that can be an important homework for you to do as we start with this journey. And the reason why I believe this is important is also to get an idea, because see, it's not always, don't think that it is about writing one essay, right? It is not about writing an essay. It's about justifying the most significant investment of your life, right? So that's what we are trying to focus on over here. So what, one thing that you can pick, or one point that you can, kind of pick to segue into figuring out what you think you can be your pitch in terms of why you would want to pitch yourself, saying that why I'm thinking this way, could be more around, say, for example, if you're working in, say, a financial company, or say, for example, you're working in a manufacturing company. That, say, for example, in a manufacturing company, that there are a lot of these machines, and there are a lot of this maintenance plan that is happening. There is a lot of work that is routine work, right? Now, what technology is doing now is this technology is trying to optimize that, okay, what are these routine works? How can we, minimize these routine works and make it more efficient and more productive? If we are looking at, say, maintenance of machines, what is the data can I use, and how can I use AI to predict the risks that we can have in terms of downtime, because this is the kind of technology people are using. This is the kind of focus that they are bringing in terms of making the systems more and more effective and more productive, right? So what you could do is, based on any wherever you're working on, right, think of what is the problem your company is trying to address, whether it is from a product, whether it is from a services perspective. Then look at, okay, now based on this challenges that your company is looking at addressing, how do you fit into this solutioning? Like, where are you fitting into it, and how do you see yourself picking this as your stepping what do you say, your stepping stone to get you to the next level, right? Which is something that you've already because that's a futuristic role. That is your lens of the future. That's what you're looking at, of what you want to solve and what you want to get to, right? So one thought process could be to bring in more clarity, because that's your space, that's your expertise level. And why it is important to pick what you are already experienced in is also because that is your insight. Like Sandeep said, that is your insight that you bring to the table, right? If you are someone who's just done Java coding all your life or all your professional life, and suddenly you pitch saying that I want to become a private equity guy, or I want to become an investment banker, it just doesn't fit in, right? There is no connecting the dots. There is no connecting of the storyline. Can you? Maybe yes, right? But the idea is, when you're convincing yourself, when you're convincing the admission committee through your thought process, through your interview process, through your essays, and thinking through what you would want to do next, you want to make sure you're connecting the dots also very clearly. And like Sandeep mentioned, having a very clear understanding of that futuristic insight of what part of the solution you want to play, right? There is a solution to some problem that you have figured out in some industry somewhere. What is your role going to be in that solutioning is something that you have to be extremely clear about when you're looking at planning your long-term goal. And your short-term goal has to be something that is getting you to that long-term goal, right? So if your short-term goal is, say, for example, to become, or if your long-term goal is to become a partner in a consulting firm, your short-term goal is to maybe start as an associate consultant or a management consultant. Maybe you want to start in a boutique consulting firm or companies like the Big Fours, where you get exposed to different kind of consulting opportunities across different departments and different sectors. And then you are slowly trying to understand the business and what it takes to bring in more business and more more revenue to the company, and then getting into a partner kind of a role. And there are some very interesting questions here on the chat window, is more around, if I have a vague idea about my short-term goal, how do I go about connecting the dots, right? I think one segue to do that and trying to understand this point, and this is, I want to combine Chetan's questions also on it, right? That a lot of people say that MBA is not required. Honestly, maybe MBA is not required, right? But the whole idea is, how soon will you get there? Because typically what an MBA can also help you do is expedite the process, right? So try to see if that is something that can help you. Why this whole discussion is a very important part of the process, and this is what we also do as part of the Crackverbal admission consulting thing, right? Where there is a discovery phase. The discovery phase is to make sure that we understand that how you get all your lens of the past and lens of the future together, right? Give a very clear understanding of, okay, how do I actually marry the two seamlessly, right? Where it doesn't look very vague, right? To answer your question, Teja, right? That it has to be something that is connecting very clearly and convincing you also why you're going through this entire process yourself.
No, and I think I'll just conclude it by, you anyway spoke about it, Shri, which is the MBA expediting. And I always give, like an analogy, which is, sometimes if you have to get from, Bangalore to Andaman, right? And let's discount the ship for a bit. But let's say that the only way to go is via flight, right? So that sometimes there are some roads like that in the world where an MBA almost is absolutely necessary, right? So sometimes, like getting into private equity firms, for example, they hire mostly MBAs. And that's why at that point of time, you have to take that flight. There is no other option. But if you have to go from Bangalore to Bombay or Bangalore to Delhi, then there are multiple ways to get there. You can fly, you can go by bus, you can go by rail. But what changes, your destination will not change, your origin will not change, but the time it takes, the cost, all of those things, there are some things that will change. So I think you can get there, but you might get there a few years later. And it's about then figuring out whether I want to invest more time in maybe myself and building myself slowly to that journey, or do I want to expedite and move on? And that's why sometimes the MBA becomes a much faster means of getting there. Not, I wouldn't say it is the only way. I would say it's the faster and probably the best way sometimes to get to places.
We go to the next aspect of it, is which is the lens of the present, right? Which is all of you are sitting here on a Saturday afternoon with one question in your head, which is, do I really need to do an MBA, right? What is my desire? What is the fueling desire that making me feel that an MBA can be an answer to what I want to do next? How can an MBA help me achieve these goals, right? So there is something in your head which is making you feel that, okay, this can be an answer to what I want to do next. And this requires maybe a year of investment. This requires maybe 2 years. There are some part-time programs that you might be looking at. There are executive MBA programs that you're looking at. Some people are very clear that India is something that you're looking at as an option. Some people are very clear that for you, study abroad is something that you're looking at. People from very diverse kind of backgrounds and profiles that are sitting and thinking of one specific problem. Imagine you are sitting and solving a case study. And I remember Sandeep talking to you about that. You want to talk about that aspect, the case study advantage of it, and how people pitch in different perspectives and their ideas around when they are looking at solving a problem.
Yeah, sure. So what happens mostly, I think one of the very cool things about an MBA is you meet, like Shri said, you meet people from, look, what we have done so far, we feel we've achieved, and it's not like we've not achieved. I think we're smart people, we've achieved a few things in our life. But when you go there and you meet different people, then you realize, oh man, the world is so much different and diverse compared to my thought process, right? So in an MBA, you would have somebody from a engineering background. Obviously, a lot of people go as an engineer, but you would also have people from economics backgrounds. You would have people from, in my class, I had somebody who was a doctor, right? And believe you me, I never thought I would ever see a doctor in a business class. But what the doctor was talking about was he wanted to have his own chain of hospitals, and he was pursuing that, and he wanted to take his skill set to more like a managerial level, right? So if you look at it that way, then you start thinking, you know what, I'm an engineer and I had engineering skills, but now I want to get into management, or I want to think a little bit more in terms of the business, and that's why I'm doing an MBA. And that's exactly why the doctor had come into the field as well. And when you're doing, I remember doing like a case study about actually hospitals once, and when we were talking a lot in terms of the business aspects of it, and we said, we'll evaluate it, we'll do a root cause analysis, we'll say, you know what, this works, we'll do a costing about it, we'll say we'll do an ROI about it, everything works. But then the doctor would come and say, in terms of he was an Indian person, so he would say, you know what, in India, this the person doesn't even think like this. The patient doesn't even think like this. He does not have the money to come and spend on it. I don't remember the exact details of it, but the point was that we had just completely ignored the cultural aspects of things, or we had completely ignored the behavior of the consumer, which only somebody who's done at that level could do it. And the same thing goes also for people who are want to go across the country, and like you want to understand something about doing something in the Latin America or Brazil or something like that, which again are developing nations, and you will say, from a developing perspective, I will apply all of these benchmarks and formulas and all of these things that I have seen here, but a person there will tell you that Brazil people don't, this is not how people think about it. So it's very different that way. I remember, and this is moving a little away from this. I remember when I worked for a German company that had Brazilian roots initially, and at that point it was the World Cup, the football World Cup, and Brazil had been thrashed 7-0, and we had like 2 weeks of people not showing up to work, and everything stopped. From a work perspective, that's because they were so devastated with the loss. So these are very cultural aspects that you don't really understand, but when you know about and you interact with people from these diverse backgrounds, that's when you start thinking, and that's when you start realizing. So I think it's a very, very, it opens up your mind, definitely, and it's a great exposure in terms of in the future, because the whole world, a lot of people talked about geography changes, some said about coming back to India, but you want to have that little bit of that kind of an exposure to understand that when you are taking business decisions, you have accounted for every single factor and you have interacted with every single stakeholder. And that stakeholder need not be somebody at the top, it can be somebody completely at the bottom who actually is your consumer, who makes those decisions before you make large business high dollar value decisions. So I think that's definitely something that an MBA helps you do in the class.
Right. So I think one aspect is more from a perspective part of it, which is understanding the cultural impact of this, right? So I remember one student I was working with, and he spoke about, there was a foreign company that was looking at setting up, say, a financing kind of a company in India, where they were looking at providing loans to small and medium businesses kind of a thing. And when they were looking at India as a market, and they were looking at what can we do to reduce the defaulting aspect of it, right? What can we do to make sure that we don't have a hit on making sure that not many people default on it and it goes on more smoothly, right? So that's when they came up with an idea that for Indians, especially culturally, they are very family oriented and they are more connected with their family. And they said, if you have one of the family members as the guarantor, right, for that loan, you will see a lot more, less default happening for loans compared to maybe another country. Again, a very small thing, but something that can actually be a very strong strategy for any company to look at and come in, right? These are like small things that you can learn to or understand during an MBA, which will give you an idea of what you can do next, right? Apart from that, even in terms of the kind of curriculum and the courses that you get exposed to, the kind of options that you have, right? One beauty of and this is something that I know a lot of people tell me, that when you do multiple internships, there are term time projects that you can do it in various kind of different specializations. One internship can be on a business development thing, one can be a completely growth strategy kind of an internship, another could be completely on a consulting kind of a thing. So what happens is, the more you have exposure to on doing different things, because you are anyway coming with the skill sets, you already have an MBA brand, and now you're exposing yourself to different kind of internships to figure out that, okay, what is it that really excites me more, or what is that I really enjoy more, right? So that is another aspect of what most people like about doing an MBA. And a lot of people even ask me that I have 10 years experience. Do you think I should do an MBA at this point? Or I have 8 years experience, or I have 19 years experience. Should I even do an MBA at this point? My only question to you is, will you regret if you don't try? Right? So think of it more from that perspective. You are looking at the next 20, 30 years of your working life. Whatever you have done is what you bring to the table. But what you want to do is why you are looking at changing course, right? That is why you're trying to question status quo. That is why you're trying to make this big leap. So think more from that perspective, that what is it that you have to lose if you actually put in that effort. Trust your skills, trust your background, trust your intelligence, trust that with all that you're doing, you will be able to get to what you can do. More from a controllable perspective, right? Obviously, there are factors like economy and visa rules changing and things like that anyway you don't have control on. But if you're looking at maybe, doing something anywhere else in the world or across geographies, this could be something that you would want to evaluate and think through, that, what is it? What is my expectation from an MBA? Is my expectation also realistic about what I want to do next? That is more from the lens of the present part, that should you do an MBA in India or should you do an MBA abroad? So for the people who are, thinking or confused on India versus abroad, let me just put down few very standard points of why India versus abroad. Obviously, one factor could be the cost aspect of it. The other aspect of it could be the comfort zone aspect of it. The third aspect could be, family being uprooted, right? Like literally, if you're going from India to, if you're married and if you have children, there is a lot more dependency around that, more from a visa perspective too. These are more from the advantages of doing an MBA in India, right? Whereas if you're looking at across geographies, the education system itself is very different, very, very, very different. And maybe Sandeep, you can pitch in on that, more on what you thought was the major difference between the thought process of how MBAs looked at more as an experiential learning process than, some courses that you have to do more from a degree perspective.
Everybody wants a great job after an MBA. Everybody wants good bump on their salaries. It's not a hidden thing. I also had the same things in my mind, but it's about whether I want it like the day I graduate, I want it, or do I want something more apart from all of these things? And for me, at that point of time, apart from a few personal trips, a little bit of conversations I had with international colleagues, I really had no international exposure. And this is one part of me that was really missing for me. And I thought, this is something that I should explore. And this, at this age, especially at an MBA level, this is also a learning thing, because until now, it was a degree that you did, right? You did your CA, you did your engineering, you did your bachelor's because you had to do it, because it's the norm. But now you're doing a degree that you want to do. And for that, you need to really look at things that make sense for you. And international exposure was number one on my list, apart from the other usual things. So going there, when you go there, you realize that again, I think I mentioned this point initially also, but if I look back, I have absolutely zero regrets on going out of the country, because the exposure level that I am today, the person I am today, how I've shaped my personality, etc., all that has just increased manifold. Because I'm not saying you would probably not get the same in India, but it's just, if you look at it more from looking at every other factor perspective, which is apart from diverse backgrounds, right, which you get, a lot of people who come for an MBA are not, see, in India, a lot of it is driven by sadly, not sadly, right, driven by, in terms of the more competitive pool, are mostly people coming from STEM backgrounds or more from engineering backgrounds who want to get in. So chances are you might be in a class which have a lot of people from similar backgrounds. Now, everybody's smart, obviously, but can you really learn completely differently something that you've not seen that the other person can teach you, right? Because in an MBA class, it's not just about learning from a professor, it's about learning from each other. And things like I mentioned, this doctor, for example, that I was in my class, or I had a lot of army people in my class, or I had a lot of different nationalities represented in my class. They opened up my mind to a lot of different things. And I learned a lot from everybody in terms of the culture, in terms of what they bring to the class. And I think as a person, you really change. I was able to get all the career aspects of it that I wanted, thankfully. And I think that you'll get from any side, India or abroad. But you also get a lot of these exposures, which I feel, at least from a personal perspective, there's more access, there's more chances to do those things internationally. And whether it's not 100% at least an international exchange from when you're doing something in India, I think that's also something that you could look at. But this has to be an experience that has to be part of your life in an ideal world.
I just want to give you a brief idea about the mentors that we have at Crackverbal from an admission consulting perspective. Everybody has had their own journey. All are from different kind of schools and background. Somebody started from an energy background to doing something completely in growth and sales right now. Somebody from a technology background and getting into the top technology firms right now. People who have had really, like for example, somebody Harish, who is now at a strategy at one of the top energy firms in the world, or somebody who is done the entire schooling and everything in US and studied in Brown and looking at a completely different growth plan for a specific startup in US, right? So everybody coming with very different backgrounds and very different plans and very different schools and experiences, because we believe that the whole idea is, so first of all, the one most important thing that we focus on at Crackverbal is we make sure that all our mentors have industry experience. So we don't want any fresh MBAs to help anyone to go through their MBA process, because we believe that fresh MBAs have still not explored what it takes to do, to get the real value of it out of an MBA. And the entire process also that we look at is more from a discovery phase to making sure that how do we focus on the discovery phase to go to a narration, which is a storyboarding phase, and then finally how do we prepare you from a storyboarding phase to make sure that you are more application ready, right? Again, the entire focus of this session is to make sure that you are well informed in this entire process. If you're looking at help, please reach out to us. We are more than happy to help you guys. And we will make sure that we bring in more valuable and authentic information to bring in extreme transparency in the entire process, which we would want to be part of your journey.
It's definitely like a great time right now. I think we're on the cusp, like 1st of July, and I know that especially from US and even from Europe, all of these MBA, a lot of the cycle is really beginning right now. Some essays have come out, some conversations have started. So this is a great time first to set your platform, right? So I think we initially touched upon your lens of your past, we touched upon the lens of the future, and these are both. Don't worry about the present right now. Present is going on at this stage. The MBA will deal with it when the MBA happens, but first the MBA has to happen. And for that, you need to have a handle on what your experiences were so far, what my skill sets are, where am I currently, and not just purely looking at it as, okay, I'm a senior software engineer, I have great coding skills and what can I do with it? You're not applying for a job. So they don't matter as much as what did I learn from these skills, right? Did I manage huge proper deadlines? Did I manage great projects? Did I deal with a lot of difficult people? Did I show a lot of leadership skills and all of those things? And then figuring out what makes sense for you, what is something that you were excited about. And here's a great way again to think about, when you look fondly back upon your life, you're looking at it and you saying that, what is my greatest achievement in life, or what is a great project that I worked on? Why did I like this project so much? That's a great starting point. And then using that, the juice out of all of that, using that to say, okay, in the future, what is something that I probably want to get at? And then looking at it like a bridge between your past and your future as the MBA that we spoke about. So I think great starting point. Definitely use this time well, create that platform, and once that platform is set, I think a lot of it becomes much clearer.
And we at Crackverbal strongly believe that we are career mentors. We are not here to just work on your application essays, right? We want to work with you to help you carve out a career. And each mentor is dedicated to focus on that, which is helping you move from a career perspective. So that's what we want to focus on. We have a few questions over here. Let me just pick a few questions so that can clarify whatever you had on your mind too. Shagun asked the question, is it a good idea to do a short-term course abroad before doing an MBA and then figure out whether it's right for me?
No, it won't hurt, obviously, but but I don't know if you're trying to use it like a primer, figuring out whether abroad works for me. Like, I want to understand what the motivation for doing this is. Is it to figure out whether I want to check whether I want to do something abroad and it makes sense or not, and I can go abroad? Is that the thought process? Or is it like, are you testing out the MBA and saying, is it a replacement for an MBA? So it will be, okay, you're saying both. So I think it definitely won't hurt for you to try it. Like, it's a great opportunity to do it. And if you have the resources, the money, the time, all of those things to do it, I would say go for it. But whether it's a tester, I'm not sure. I don't really see a huge, what would you get out of doing this and saying, okay, the MBA works for me or not? I don't think you'll be able to make that call from this. But any course outside is information, is exposure, is awareness. So go for it.
So there's one more question over here which says, what is a good avenue to look at all the potential options that can be possible post an MBA, and for someone to just look at an options and take a call of what excites him or her on the options? To answer this question, I think first of all, there is no finite list that you can look at. It is so diverse, because in every industry, in every company, you will have multiple options that you can look at more from an MBA perspective. There are people who are looking at product level stuff. There are people who are looking at delivery level stuff. There are people who are focusing on consulting. There are people who are focusing on the execution aspect of it. There are people who are focusing on just the planning part of it or the strategizing part of it. So there are multiple roles across different industries. So honestly, what I would suggest to you is pick what is your strength and what you think, what you have done so far in your career and what you have enjoyed doing. Maybe pick that as your potential motivation or skill, and then see that what could be the options that you can map to based on, say, for example, if you feel that you're very good analytically, maybe you want to pick up roles that explore or exploit that analytical skill in you, right? So that could be something that you could look at. But honestly, there is no finite list as such. But LinkedIn can be a great research option. You can just put in some school name and look at what are the possible roles people get into in that particular MBA, especially if you're looking at any specific school that you have, right? That could be a good option for you to look at. There's one more question here. I hold a master's degree in computer science. Will it be a merit or demerit during the admissions or a later stage? Well, I don't think it is a demerit as long as I don't know when you've done your master's in computer science. I hope there is some kind of work experience after you have done it, because then there is a reason for you to justify that why you think an MBA is important for you at this stage, right? There has to be some work experience between it. If you're looking at immediately doing it, honestly, it will be tough for you to justify that aspect. Is double MBA a good option in an Indian context? Doing MBA, let's say an open school part-time to get an idea if MBA is good for me, and then look at a perfect school. I think it will be too much of experiment and waste of your time if you do that, right? Because even if it is an open school, if you're really looking at taking a value out of it, I'm not sure whether it can really impact your career progression for that matter, right? Sandeep, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, look, if you're looking at it as an experiment, then I would say treat it as an experiment only. And then, it's basically you're doing it and saying, I'm just a trial thing, and it's not a degree that I'm valuing at this stage, because you're doing the MBA for a reason, which could be that you want growth in your career or progression, or just want that bit of analytical thinking, etc. So which, if I am the guy looking at your application and look at the fact that you've done a part-time MBA, I feel, okay, you've already gotten all of those things. Then why are you considering another MBA at this stage? So there has to be justifications that will go into picture. And honestly, if you've already done an MBA, especially in India only, and you're looking at again within India, so it might be a difficult way to justify from that perspective. If you're looking at it purely as an experiment, then you just do it as an experiment. You don't talk about you don't even consider it as and then you look at it as a fresh attempt.
Do maybe short-term courses, some small courses around. There are ample courses available online from even top schools. So maybe you want to just identify or understand whether there are certain things that interest you. There are design thinkings from Kellogg. There's product management strategy from Kellogg. Might work out slightly expensive, or if you're looking at other schools also, even ISB has a lot of these. They are launching their online courses very soon. But at the same time, there are other schools that have a lot of these online courses options. So maybe you want to pick those small product kind of small courses which can give you an idea on planning, strategy, project management, product management kind of a thing, just to give you an idea, but not maybe an open school part-time, because that will confuse the ADCOM or the admission committee more, and you also more, because it's also a lot of investment more from your part. Whether even if it's a part-time program, you just still want to make sure that it is an effective unless you put in the full effort on that part-time program, you would not know whether it really is good enough for you or not, right? So it's like double work in that case, right? So that could be something we would suggest. There's somebody who says, for someone who plans to complete an MBA and work in India in a family business, how relevant would it be to study abroad? Does exposure outweigh the relevance in terms of geography, finance, which could probably be discussed in case studies and coursework for an MBA? Right. So I think there are various aspects to look at this. One aspect of it is, like you've already responded yourself, which is more around geography and finance. If you're looking at going global, even from a family business perspective, that could be something that could really help you. The network could be something that you could really leverage. Tomorrow, if you're saying that you want to go global and you want to hire somebody in some other country, and you have this huge alumni network, and you know that you can use that network to even hire somebody over there, right? So, and there are a lot of things like compliance policies across countries, and also today, if you're looking at India, and if you're looking at India as a pool for doing a business, I think you have to look at it more from a global perspective, right? Because the way we are growing, the way we are adapting to technology and changes, I think it is no more like India restricted. It is from a global perspective itself.
Whether you want to do it in India, whether it's a family business, etc., you have to look at it as what are you going to get out of the MBA, right? So a lot of it, so you probably are not interested in finding opportunities post an MBA because you're going to be working, coming back to your family business. But for you, it's more relevant to understand best practices. For example, of course, I don't know what your family business is, but let's say it's like, again, a supply chain industry or something like that, where you need to understand how a developed country is doing these things. And it's good, maybe you can do an internship, maybe you can just do case studies in that country, maybe you meet different people, you get exposure to how they're dealing with all of these things, and that enhances your exposure, your knowledge, etc. And then you come back and then you implement those things back home in your family business and help grow your family business, right? So there are a lot of things you can do, like a takeaway from doing things abroad.
Last question over here: is it a good option to do an online MBA from a good institution versus abroad? Honestly, this is completely your choice. The only difference maybe online MBA versus a full-time MBA would be that you don't have that feel of it's like being committed and involved wala difference, right? Which is if you are you've completely left everything and going and staying in a completely, even if you're looking at India for that exam, for that matter, if you're in ISB or any of the IIMs, you are inside the campus, you are staying with the people over there day in and day out, you're working on assignments, you're interacting with people over there, right? It is it's like literally cutting off from what you've already been doing so far, taking a break for a couple of years or maybe 1 year, 2 year, whatever, depending on the time of the MBA, and then looking at going to the next thing, right? More from a value perspective, a full-time is obviously a lot more value than an online option. However, online, I think you could choose more from a perspective if you feel you don't have the flexibility to take a break, if you don't have the flexibility more from a budget perspective, because investment obviously is higher because you have lodging costs when you're looking at a full-time MBA, that could be a reason of why you choose an online option. Second is, if you see that then, so like for example, there are these lot of leadership programs and online programs from top schools that you could take, where if you have a choice to move in your own company to the next level, right? These courses have a lot of value. Maybe not, for a completely different industry shift, but if you're moving in your own company and moving, in that ladder in your own company, there is a very high chance that even with an online MBA that can help. And it has happened with many of our students that we have worked with. So it's definitely, it might be a good option. You could even explore part-time MBA options in India. So there ISB has part-time MBA options like PGP Pro and PGP Max. IIMs have quite a few part-time options. So maybe if cost could be a reason, that could also be something that you could consider. Thank you so much, everyone. This is lovely chatting with you, and I really enjoyed this very, very interactive session.